All right. So this is what you're going to be doing for the next 2 days after today. You need to have, and I have these, are my colors that I need. I use the twistable crayons. You can use crayons, colored pencils, whatever. Do not use markers, because if you use markers, I need you to underline it and not color over it. If you color over it, then you're not going to be able to read it after. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to be reading 2 passages each day. And each day there will be questions. There will be 5 questions where we will have to be talking about the text structure, and another question where you'll be answering a short answer or a question about what the text structure is. So I'm going to show you my expectations for this. And there are questions that say, which part of the text did you color red? Which part of the text did you color blue? And so forth. Do not skip those. Those are half of the assignment. So if you do not write those, then you will not get full credit. So this is what I'm expecting you to do. First of all, you need to read it to understand. So what I need you to do is, this is attached to the assignment. I need you to print this out. It is not included in your packet. And I want you to read it first. Get your supplies out and then come on back. Okay, now that you read it to understand, now what we're going to be doing is reading the questions. So now that I understand, I know I need to have red. So my first question is, according to the Great Depression, what was a major cause of the Great Depression? Okay, so anything I find that is a cause of the Great Depression, I am going to color over it red. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. And that is in the Great Depression. So I'm just looking in the first passage. Okay. The decade was the 1920s. The decade of the 1920s was a time of wealth. Many Americans moved to cities hoping to find jobs, which made cities in America thrive. While the cities were doing very well, rural areas began to struggle. Farmers were very poor. As a result, on September 4th, 1929, the stock market prices dropped. The stock market is a place where ownership in companies is bought and sold. People began to distrust the stock market and many sold their stocks. Due to people selling their stocks, the stock market crashed on October 29th, 1929. Because of the stock market crash, many people lost a lot of money. Some people lost everything they owned. Many companies went out of business, which caused many people to lose their jobs. People were unable to find jobs, so they became homeless. About half of the children in the United States did not have enough food or shelter. Many people became very sick. Because of the crash, trading with other countries decreased. Other countries were soon affected. By this time, that became known as the Great Depression. So, all of them losing the money and everything is called the Great Depression. So what caused everybody to lose their money? So I'm going to, let's see here. Stock market prices dropped. So you're following along and doing the same. Many people sold their stocks. The stock market crashed. And that caused people to lose their jobs and things. So now when I go into answer the question, I'm going to say, according to the Great Depression, what was a major cause of the Great Depression? Children were hungry, people were homeless, the stock market crashed, trading with other countries decreased. All of these, A, B, and D, are effects, what happened after. The stock market crashing is the only thing that happened to cause the Great Depression. The rest of these were all effects. Now my next answer would be to type in these 3 things. In the text, I colored red these 3 things, and I would type them up. My next one, orange. According to the Great Depression, so the same passage, what caused people to become hopeless? Homeless, not hopeless, homeless. Choose all that apply. So this is one that I can pick more than one. I'm not even going to look at the answers right now. I'm just going to know that I'm going to say what caused people to become homeless. Okay? Due to people selling their stocks, I'm going to start where I left off. On October 29, 1929, because of the stock market crash, many people lost a lot of money. Some people lost everything they own. Many companies went out of business. Okay, so that would cause people to be homeless, right? It caused people to lose their jobs, which wouldn't the people losing their jobs cause them to become homeless? They were unable to find jobs, so they became homeless. So many companies went out of business, which caused them to lay off people or to have people leave their jobs. They lost their jobs, and then they couldn't find other jobs, so they became homeless. So because I have those things highlighted, now I can go look and see what my choices are, because I have to pick more than one. People became sick. People lost their jobs. Companies went out of business, and children did not have food and shelter. Now, if I go off of what I highlighted, it would be B and C. People lost their jobs, and many companies went out of business. Caused people to become homeless. Okay, this one says according to the Great Depression, so it's the same text. According to the Great Depression, why were other countries impacted by the Great Depression? So how did other countries, even though this happened in America, how were other countries affected? So I'm highlighting any ways that other countries were affected. About half of the children in the United States did not have enough food or shelter. Many people became very sick. So these are all things that happened as a result of the Depression. Because of the crash, trading with other countries decreased. Ooh, so that's other countries. I see the word other countries. Decreased. Other countries were soon affected by this time as well. So now let's look at the answer. According to the Great Depression, why were other countries impacted? What I highlighted was about the trading. Now this one says according to 1930s in America. So that's the next text. This is what my text looks like. It is very colorful. Going back and finding the evidence prior to answering the question is what is going to help you find the evidence. It is very important. Do not do it after you answer the question. You need to do it before. So we're going to read this, because those are the next two questions. Use this text. So I would like you to read it to understand it and then come back. Make sure you have, we will need a green, a purple, and a blue crayon or colored pencil for these next questions. Okay, now that you've read to understand, I'm going to need a green crayon, and the question says, according to the 1930s in America, what happened after Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president? Choose all that apply. That means there may be more than one question. So I need to, or answer. I may need to go through all of, or I do need to go through all of these because I may have more than one. Does it mean I have more than one? No. It means I could. So the question says, what happened after he became president? After he became president. So I want to color green all the events that happened after he became president. Okay? So we're going to start at the beginning. The 1920s was a decade known as the Roaring Twenties. During this time following World War I, America's economy was booming and American cities were prosperous. On March 25th, 1929, a mini stock market crash occurred because investors started to sell stocks quickly. The economy was showing signs of trouble to come. Steel production declined, sales decreased, and Americans were building debt. On September 20th, the London Stock Exchange crashed. This made Americans question overseas investments. The market was unstable for the following month. On October 29th, the stock market crashed in America. The crash resulted in people distrusting the economy. People started to reduce spending. The demand for goods decreased. Prices of goods increased. As spending decreased, companies were forced to lay off workers. So just like in the other text, they were starting to lose money, so they had to fire people, lay them off. So nobody had jobs. In 1930, banks failed due to people defaulting on their loans. So in other words, the banks failed because people couldn't pay their loans. So the banks made no money. People began to withdraw their money from the banks, and that caused more bank failures. The economy was at its lowest in the winter of 1932 and 1933. Unemployment rates were up to 25%. About half of American banks failed. The economy was, I was already there. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt became the president. So the question is, what happens after? Okay, so this is where I want to start. Roosevelt restored Americans' confidence in the economy. In one of his famous quotes, he stated, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Roosevelt developed a recovery plan called the New Deal. Okay, so that's something that we need to highlight. The plan provided relief programs that helped America recover from the Great Depression. Okay. I'm actually going to fold this paper a little bit so we can see it. Rapid growth from the 1934 through 1937. That happened after he was president. However, America faced another recession in 1937. While the economy improved again in 1938, the Great Depression continued through the remainder of the 1930s decade. As the Great Depression ended, World War II began. So, these are all after he became president. So let's see what choices we have. If I highlighted it green. Half of America's banks failed. That happened before the economy was at its lowest. Let's see here. Roosevelt developed a plan, yes, and he restored their confidence. I have that highlighted because the economy was at its lowest right when he became president. So that wasn't after. Okay. So those are our questions that are colored here. So now we're going to look at number 5. Number 5 is blue. The sentence is from the last paragraph in the 1930s. Rapid growth occurred from 1934 through 1937. However, America faced another recession in 1937. Why did the author include this sentence? And I'm going to color this blue as well because it answers both questions. Okay? So why do we think the author included it? To explain the causes of the Great Depression. This talks about what happens after. So that's not right. To explain the effects of the Great Depression, maybe. To explain the solution of the Great Depression, that is not a solution because it continues. To tell the sequence of the end of the Great Depression. So effects, it doesn't really say the effects, but this is a sequence with all of those dates. Now, this on the next 2 assignments, I have actually created into a multiple choice question. It is identify the text structure, okay? And then another question that says, how do you know, okay? Or what did you color purple or blue? Some of them, one of them says blue. So let's see, the Great Depression. The first passage, I'm going to go through and I am going to reread it and highlight, or I'm going to put boxes, let's see, I'm just going to use any color, around keywords. That will show me the text structure. So the decade of the 1920s was a time of wealth. Many Americans moved to cities hoping to find jobs, which made cities in America thrive. While the cities were doing very well, rural areas began to struggle. Farmers were very poor. As a result, that's one. Dates are also keywords. On September 4th, 1929, stock market prices dropped. The stock market is a place where ownership in companies is bought and sold. People began to distrust the stock market and many sold their stocks. Due to the stock market crashed on October 29th, 1929. I'm just underlining dates. Because of the stock market crash, many people lost a lot of money. Some people lost everything they owned. Many people went out of business, which caused many people to lose their jobs. I'm seeing a lot of cause and effect text structure words here. So this has dates, yes, but it is telling us what caused the Great Depression and what happened as a result. So I'm going to write here, the Great Depression is written in a cause and effect text structure. Now, how do I know that? I'm going to take my purple and I am going to color these words. So anytime I say, what did I color purple? I highlight or I colored keywords such as made, result, as a result, due to, because, caused, became, because of. You can write that in your reasons. How do I know it's written in cause and effect text structure? Because it uses these keywords and it's telling us the causes of the Great Depression and the effects. The next one is the 1930s in America. It says, what is that text structure? So I'm going to use my purple crayon and I'm going to go through and find keywords. The 1920s was a decade known as the Roaring Twenties. During this time, that's a good one, following World War I, America's economy was booming and American cities were prosperous. On March 25th, 1929, it's a date that's usually important, a mini stock market crash occurred because investors started to sell stocks quickly. The economy was showing signs of trouble to come. Steel production declined, sales decreased, and Americans were building debt. So I know what happened in the 20s. I know what happened on the 29th, or March 25th, 1929. Now I know what happens on September 20th. The London Stock Exchange crashed. This made Americans question overseas investments. The market was unstable for the following month. That tells us time. On October 29th, the stock market crashed in America. The crash resulted in people distrusting the economy. People started to reduce spending. The demand for goods decreased. Prices of goods increased. As spending decreased, companies were forced to lay off workers. In 1930, there's a lot of dates and they're all in order. Banks failed due to, there's a lot of cause and effect here too, defaulting on their loans. People began to withdraw from their banks. The economy was at its lowest in 1932 and 1933. Unemployment rates were up to 25%. About half of the American banks failed. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt became the president. We also here have 1934 and 1937, 1930s, and 1937. So there are dates. There are cause and effect in here. Yes, it is talking about some things that happened during these dates and what happened as a result. But all of these dates are in order, and it's telling me the events, and that is more than the other keywords. So this would be chronological text structure because it is telling me the events of the Great Depression. Now, if I was to ask you the second question, I basically already gave you the answer. Describe how each text structure helps each author present his or her ideas. What I would say is that the Great Depression is written in a cause and effect text structure, which helps the author share the causes of the Great Depression and how the Great Depression affected people. I can also say the 1930s in America is written in a chronological text structure, and the author is able to share the events of the entire time period. And I would give examples of that. So this is essentially what you will be doing with the next couple days of your practice.